Hi, my name is Chris Bizon. I am the Director of Analytics and Data Science at Renaissance Computing Institute at UNC Chapel Hill. And I am the PI of the FRINK project, which is part of the Proto-Open Knowledge Network. Before I tell you about FRINK, I want to say a couple words about the Open Knowledge Network. The Open Knowledge Network is a program dedicated to bringing together information across a wide range of domains, structuring that information and making it available to society, broadly speaking, to analyze and query. The idea of the Open Knowledge Network is to take these different sets of information and structure them in a common way. And that common way is using something called a knowledge graph. A knowledge graph is a nice general way to structure all sorts of information. So you can think of it like this. Um, you have entities. So these are things or concepts. So you might have a person, or you might have a company or a disease. And then you have relationships between those entities. So you can think of the entities as little blobs, and you can think of the relationships as lines connecting the blobs. And that line may be something like person works at company or person has disease. Um, which is it's a nice structure because it's extremely generic. And so you can take information from all kinds of domains and put it into that structure. And now you have a common format and a common um, tool for bringing that data together. So it allows you don't have to have one kind of database to hold biological data and a different kind of database to hold manufacturing data. You have one kind of database, it's able to hold all of that data so that you can use it together to form cross-domain insights. Uh, But again, it is a nice formal representation of that knowledge. So that means that you have a large array of tools that have already been developed over decades that enable you to query all of that information in a structured way. You know how it works, um, and you get a very reliable system that allows you to extract really useful information out of a sea of knowledge. As you might imagine, this is increasingly used in the AI and machine learning space. So one thing that we see somewhat frequently is the idea that, say, we're thinking about something like a large language model. We know that large language models can hallucinate information, but you can provide knowledge to one of these tools in the form of a knowledge graph. And the LLM is able to query the graph to double check information and to provide precise facts and data that it can use in a response to a user. But these databases and structured knowledge can be used from the ground up in machine learning uh, applications to extract new information from. Um, if the data is structured nicely, it can also be used to provide context and provenance, such as, what is the source of a particular relationship? Where did this fact come from? How do we know it to be true? And then it also can be used to provide interpretation for various tools. So you can think of a sort of a 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon situation where I may start with, say, one actor, and I can go through a bunch of movies and end up with another actor. Those sort of traceable paths can provide context and explanatory power to a machine learning algorithm. And with all of that in place, you can now take these graphs, make them publicly available, right? This is by and large all public data, and we can make it available through common interfaces that are standard, that everyone knows how to query. And the information there can be extracted, it can be analyzed, and it can be used to address various societal challenges. Okay, so that's kind of the setup, knowledge graphs, what they are, why we care, what we want to do with them, what they're for. What is FRINK? Well, stands for Fabric Integrating Networked Knowledge. So in the OKN project, there are many different teams, and most of those teams are involved in creating these knowledge graphs that I've been talking about. And they're very domain specific. So one might be a certain type of manufacturing data, another one might be a certain type of biological data. FRINK is not doing that. What FRINK is doing is providing the backbone or the fabric in which those graphs can actually interoperate. Um, there are two fabric teams currently, uh, and they're both providing sort of different versions of this fabric. What I mean by fabric, well, there are actually three fabrics. Um, When we think about what FRINK is trying to provide to the Theme 1 or knowledge producing teams, uh, there are kind of three silos here. There's the technical fabric, there's the knowledge fabric, and there's the social fabric. So the technical fabric is kind of what you might imagine. That is, it's a bunch of cloud native infrastructure, right? It's servers, it's that are running databases, there are query interfaces, there are ingest tools. There's all of the CI, CD to keep that stuff running and operating. And that's kind of the base level, right? We have to be able to provide the actual tooling to run this project. The second fabric is really around the knowledge. That is, what are the knowledge standards that have to be in place to allow the different knowledge graphs being created by these teams to interoperate? What do we need to decide around different vocabulary systems? What do we need to decide about different data models? How really realistically are graphs going to talk to one another at a knowledge level? How can we make sure that the concept of University of North Carolina in one graph is represented in the same way as UNC in another graph, and that we can recognize that those are really talking about the same entity? One of the things that we realized pretty early on is uh, the universe is a big place, meaning that if you think about all of the different kinds of domains of information that you have, the chances that any two of them overlap enough to provide meaningful information is not all that high, right? If I have a knowledge graph around 17th century opera and a different knowledge graph around 20th century television shows, um, there may not be any entities overlapping in those two graphs. And so I can't really figure out how they go together. So what we have done is to bring in what we think of as a knowledge substrate. And by that, what I mean is a big graph that is perhaps not as deep as the graphs that are being created in the Open Knowledge Network, but is very broad. And that is a graph called Wikidata, which is a public graph. And it covers many, many, many domains, at least a little bit. So any of the Theme 1 graphs or the graphs created for the Proto-Open Knowledge Network that are brought into the system can connect to that Wikidata in some way. So even if these two graphs don't directly connect, they each connect to Wikidata, and that provides almost a knowledge bus that these two graphs can communicate through. And finally, but most importantly, is the social fabric. That is, the program in which we're operating is made up of many different teams, and those teams have to work together. We have to have a common vision for what we're trying to build and how we're going to get there. And so these are the three fabrics that FRINK provides. Within the Open Knowledge Network, FRINK is collecting information, collecting these knowledge graphs from the different knowledge creating teams. We are ingesting it into this set of database servers. We are providing the query mechanisms by which external or internal users are able to access and analyze that information, and providing exploratory tools to make sense of the graphs. FRINK can be accessed through this URL. If you go to this site, you will see a bunch of documentation about how knowledge gets uploaded into FRINK, how things can be updated, best practices for structuring knowledge graphs, as well as access to the query tools that you can use to write Sparkle queries against all of these different databases. Additionally, you can find within this website the Open Knowledge Network registry. This is the list of all of the information that has been uploaded into FRINK, as well as some capability for knowledge providers to control certain aspects of how that data is ingested or displayed. And finally, how do individuals engage with FRINK? Well, again, FRINK is to some degree a back-end component of the Open Knowledge Network. So we have less external interaction than maybe some of the knowledge providing teams do. So we consider our customers to be largely the other members of the Proto-Open Knowledge Network program. So we have a lot of interaction with the theme ones, that is the knowledge providers. We work with them to ingest their data, make sure that it's properly displayed and is queryable, that the performance of their tools is working well. We provide query and analysis tools, and these are available to the public who want to write Sparkle queries against these data. We interact with the education and engagement components of the Proto-Open Knowledge Network in things like we're doing today. And we provide information through our research and development contributions, producing tooling and scientific papers that will come out of this work. So that is the FRINK program. Thank you for listening.